Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. Welcome to the 2017 Monaco Grand Prix Live Commentary stream. As always with this commentary stream, please be advised that I will not actually be showing any real-world Formula 1 footage as the race is happening. However, I do recommend that you position yourself strategically between my voice and your computer/television screen so that you can follow the race as it's going on, as well as join in with the live chat going on here. Of course, we can't go any further without saying what a big day today is. Memorial Day weekend, traditionally in the United States, happens to be the biggest racing weekend of the year. We have 3 world-class international motorsport events occurring today, beginning, of course, with the Monaco Grand Prix. However, at noon, my time anyway, the Indy 500 will then follow the Monaco Grand Prix, and then we conclude the day with the Coke 600 NASCAR race over from North Carolina. So we have truly an entire day full of racing action ahead of us, and it all begins now in Monaco, the grandest Grand Prix of all, to kick off this wonderful day of motorsports action. We have a few storylines heading into today's Monaco Grand Prix, the biggest of which has to be qualifying. Yes, Kimi Räikkönen, for the first time since the 2008 French Grand Prix, finds himself in pole position for a Formula 1 race. Absolutely wonderful to see Kimi Räikkönen back at the front of the grid. His pole lap of a 1:12.178 is by far the fastest ever lap around this Monaco Grand Prix circuit since the race has been being held since the 1920s. In second place, we have Sebastian Vettel, also a Ferrari, his lap time from Q3, a 1:12.221. P3 for Valtteri Bottas of Mercedes, a 1:12.223. P4, Max Verstappen for Red Bull, 1:12.496. P5, Daniel Ricciardo, 1:12.998. P6 for Carlos Sainz of Toro Rosso, 1:13.162. P7 for Sergio Perez of Force India for a 1:13.329. P8 Romain Grosjean for Haas, 1:13.349. P9 Jenson Button making a one-off return for McLaren, deputizing for Fernando Alonso, who is otherwise engaged for the Indy 500. His lap time, a 1:13.613. And our final Q3 finisher, however, he was not able actually to participate in Q3 due to a crash. Stoffel van Dorn of McLaren, 1:13.249 was his last posted lap time set in Q2. Our Q2 finishers, Daniel Kvyat in P11, a 1:13.516. P12, Nico Hülkenberg for Renault, 1:13.628. P13, Kevin Magnussen of Haas, 1:13.979. P14, Lewis Hamilton of Mercedes, 1:14.106. We are not entirely sure why Lewis Hamilton had such a bad day in qualifying. However, Mercedes' fortunes seem to have turned in FP2 on Thursday. Hamilton led FP1 and then he was never seen again. Nobody's quite sure what Hamilton's problems are in that Mercedes. Apparently, Bottas is unaffected by whatever these issues are. P15 for Felipe Massa in the Williams, a 1:20.529, his best lap time in Q2. Our Q1 finishers, Esteban Ocon in the Force India, a 1:14.101. P17, Jolyon Palmer in the second Renault, a 1:14.696. P18 for Lance Stroll in the Williams, a 1:14.893. P19, Pascal Wehrlein in the Sauber, a 1:15.159, and P20 and last on the grid for today's race, Marcus Ericsson in the second Sauber, a 1:15.276. Our championship standings headed into this race on the driver's side. Sebastian Vettel leads with 104 points on the board. In second place is Lewis Hamilton with 98. P3, Valtteri Bottas with 63 points scored. P4, our pole sitter Kimi Räikkönen with 49 points. And P5, Daniel Ricciardo of Red Bull with 37 points on the board. we could see a big shakeup in the Drivers' Championships standings today because Lewis Hamilton is starting so far down on the grid. Of course, there is never any guarantee in Monaco that you're going to be able to score points, even if you're only starting in P14, only 4 spots out of the points, because overtaking is so difficult at this circuit. Kimi Räikkönen could well jump up in position today. And Sebastian Vettel, of course, starting from P2 on the grid, could extend his overall championship lead. On the Constructors' Championship side, we have Mercedes leading the Constructors' Championship over Ferrari, 161 points to Mercedes versus Ferrari's 153. There's a rather considerable gap to P3 in the Constructors' Championship at the moment to Red Bull with 72 points on the board. They, on the other hand, are battling with Force India. Force India having been very consistent so far this season with 53 points on the board. The gap there between Red Bull and Force India, 72 to 53. Barring disaster, I don't think that's going to be changing today. However, it is conceivable. Toro Rosso rounding out the top 5 in the Constructors' Championship with 21 points on the board. We're now just about 14 minutes away from the start of the formation lap, and the official word from the FIA is that chance of rain for this race is 0%. Don't get too excited, everybody. However, it is so far shaping up to be an absolutely glorious day in the little Principality of Monaco. Therefore, we should have some great lap times, and I'm very interested to see just how quickly this race may go by. We do remember from Australia how quickly the pace of that race was set. The entire race was over 57 laps in an hour and 20-something minutes. Monaco does tend to be close to the 2-hour limit simply because the track is slow and there are 78 laps. However, with Kimi Räikkönen's lap time of a 1:12.1 being set in qualifying, yes, that was on low tanks and sticky tires, but I do think the cars are going to be quick even in the race here, so we're going to see what that pace is. Yes, that Red Bull Force India story. Yes, I do put my money on Red Bull in order to be set up to consolidate that third place in the Constructors' Championship. However, who knows what's going to happen? The other big storylines for this race are going to be to follow the progress of Lewis Hamilton and Jenson Button. Hamilton starting P13 on the grid, of course, and Jenson Button, although he did make a good qualifying effort, he's going to start in 20th, and he's currently shown in the pit lane due to engine penalties that are going to affect him, courtesy of Fernando Alonso's time in that car. So even though Button was technically able to make it into Q3, well, penalties. Such is life in this sport. However, it will be interesting to see what Jenson Button can do, if anything. Of course, that's not to say that the Honda engine in the back of that recalcitrant McLaren is going to be any reliable, but we will see. Lewis Hamilton starting from P13, I think it is possible for him to make up some positions and perhaps work his way into the points. However, it is so difficult to overtake around this circuit simply because the circuit itself is not much wider than 1.5 of these Formula One cars put side to side to each other. Therefore, who knows what's going to happen? I think Mercedes should be able to pull out a strategy that's going to enable Hamilton to be out of sync with everybody else in terms of the pit stops, and perhaps he will be able to leapfrog some positions that way. However, we've all seen what Mercedes strategists can do when they're not exactly on the ball, so we'll see. I know it's definitely within Hamilton's capacity as a driver to be able to make up those positions, but so much of this sport, so much of the performance of a driver is linked to what his team does in terms of strategy and also what his team does in terms of telling him what the lay of the land is, because these drivers, although they are very skilled, they are very isolated in the cockpit and they can't really get a very good sense of what else is going on with the rest of the complexion of the race. So it's all on Mercedes today to be able to get Hamilton up the field. I think they can do it, but will they? As for Raikkonen and Vettel at the top, the Ferraris make very good starts so far this year, so we're going to see if there's going to be any action into Turn 1. However, I do expect Kimi Raikkonen to maintain the lead for the first lap at least, and who knows, if he is feeling particularly inspired, I say he is after that pole lap yesterday, I do think there is a very good chance that Kimi Raikkonen might be winning this race. However, we are a long way from that. NBC, my terrestrial US TV coverage, just running that storyline that Ferrari have not won the Monaco Grand Prix since Michael Schumacher did it all the way back in 2001. Today, with Ferrari having that front row lockout, are their fortunes about to change? I think so. Valtteri Bottas, of course, lurking there in third place just behind both of the Ferraris. Will he try to do something off the start like he did in Russia? We'll see. However, Ferrari not having a Monaco Grand Prix win since 2001. It should be an interesting storyline no matter what happens, and I don't actually remember when Ferrari's last front row lockout at Monaco was. 2008, I want to say. And then before that, it didn't happen until 1979. I am absolutely sure of that particular stat. So it's been a long time coming for Ferrari in Monaco. Historically, it is not one of their better circuits. However, that's what we've got. And yes, you are correct. Valtteri Bottas has never scored points in Monaco. I do think he's going to put that right today, however. He's done a very good job in qualifying, and I do think he will be able to keep it on the island for the race. Mercedes are definitely hoping he can keep it on the island because he is realistically their only hope at scoring some decent points today. We're now coming down to just about 7 minutes before the start of the formation lap. The World Feed TV cameras are just showing us the wonderfully glamorous shots of downtown Monte Carlo and the surrounding departments in this very small country. The weather does look absolutely tremendous out there, and I do think we have some perfect conditions for a motor race. All the cars have now formed up onto the grid, and the mechanics are just going through their final checks to get them ready before the start of the formation lap. Most of the drivers are getting into the cars now, and it's all set for what seems to be an absolutely cracking Monaco Grand Prix. Yes, Williams, I tend to think they're going to be pretty much a non-story in this race. We have Felipe Massa starting in P14 and Lance Stroll starting in P17. Of course, Stroll recovering from his crash. However, Hamilton is in P13 immediately in front of Felipe Massa. If Hamilton makes a mistake off the start, as we know he is somewhat liable to do, perhaps Felipe Massa could dispose of Lewis Hamilton off the line. However, if that does not happen, I do not expect the Williams to be able to challenge the Mercedes at all. What will be interesting, though, is to see how Lewis Hamilton is able to deal with Stoffel Van Dorn in front of him in P12. How will that McLaren get off the line? Will that hamper Hamilton in its own right? We'll see. As far as the guys immediately in front of Hamilton, we have Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Kvyat, and Grosjean. The only driver who might give Hamilton some trouble there is Grosjean, I must say. The Renault is really not up to fighting with the Mercedes, even though Hülkenberg is very skilled, and Magnussen, I'm not sure if Magnussen has the ability to hold up Lewis Hamilton, but Grosjean definitely does. So even though Magnussen is in that Haas, which we do know is pretty good, I'm not entirely sure he has the overall stamina to keep up with Lewis Hamilton. Grosjean, however, does, and that would be an interesting fight for P8. Of course, the further up the field you go, the more difficult it then becomes to gather more positions. Dealing with guys like Perez and Sainz, that's going to be a problem, and certainly if Hamilton manages to get up to Daniel Ricciardo, that is going to be quite the fight for the highlight reel. Meanwhile, I do expect the top two drivers, Raikkonen and Vettel, to pull away into the distance. Yes, that is the problem. Hamilton is going to get stuck behind that McLaren, and then it's going to start spewing oil all over the racetrack. So we'll see what happens here. In terms of getting a PC for Assetto Corsa, I wouldn't recommend any processor with lower power than the Intel i5. I run the i7, and it does seem to be pretty good, but definitely at least the i5. In terms of RAM, you're going to want... I'm running 12 gigabytes of RAM, and sometimes I don't think it's enough, but you're going to want definitely 8 gigs of RAM, preferably more, and then you will need a dedicated graphics card. I run the NVIDIA GTX 960, and it's actually kind of slow, so you want the 960 at very, very least. Do not get a laptop. They simply don't have the packaging that you need in order to deal with the heat that these things generate, so get a desktop. It will pay off in the end. They're more serviceable. You can service individual components if you need to. You can replace individual components if you need to. Laptops tend to integrate graphics cards directly into the motherboard, meaning that if you lose a graphics card, you have to replace the motherboard, and at that point, you might as well buy a completely new computer. So get a desktop no matter what you do. And yes, spewing oil, that yellow and orange striped flag meaning slippery surface, yes. That was all over the place in F1 Championship Edition, and I do think there is a high likelihood that we will see it today, considering we do have two McLarens in this race. Just coming down now to within 2 minutes to the start of the formation lap for this 2017 Monaco Grand Prix. The camera is showing a whole battalion of Ferrari fans there in one of the grandstands. The drivers are now in the cars and the engines are being started. The tire blankets still on for the moment. The mechanics will keep them on until the last possible instant, and then the formation lap will get underway here. Camera showing Jenson Button sitting there in the garage. Button will be starting from the pit lane. The formation lap getting underway here around the streets of Monaco. Front of the grid has just made it through Saint-Devote, and if I'm not mistaken, I do believe Valtteri Bottas has overtaken Sebastian Vettel off the line. I'm not entirely sure what happened there. We'll have to see it again. However, provided he gives that position back, I don't think there will be any official sanctions invoked there. However, having a look at the track conditions, everything looks absolutely immaculate around this place. And of course, we would not expect anything less from these Monégasque track marshals. There are over 600 marshals stationed at various points around this circuit. Such is the nature of the beast here. If they need to clear a car away, these guys can do it in literally less than 1 minute. They are so good. They have strategically positioned cranes and recovery vehicles around this circuit. By the time a car manages to make it around to the same point of the lap, again, any stricken vehicles or debris are already well cleared. These guys always do such a great job running this race year after year. Coming down the harbor side now are the front runners through the Nouvelle Chicane. You can see all the yachts in the harbor. They back them up by about 5 meters from the edge of the dock there for the race sessions. Sometimes in free practice, you'll see the boats pulled up right next to the road there. However, for the race, they do tell them to back up just a little bit. Radio from Button. Fernando Alonso live on the radio from Indianapolis to Jenson Button, wishing Jenson good luck for the race. That is really, really cool. Absolutely, I have never seen anything like that before. That was really cool. Thank you, Liberty Media. The cars are now forming up on the grid. The first few rows are already there. And now we await the lights for the start of the grandest Grand Prix of all, Monaco. The lights are coming up. 3 lights, 4 lights, 5, pause. They're out, and it's go! Looks like a decent start from Kimi Räikkönen in the front. Sebastian Vettel slotting in behind him. Will Valtteri Bottas try anything into Saint-Devote? No, he thinks better of that. There was some contact between the 2 Red Bulls behind. I don't think there's been any damage. Ricciardo and Verstappen holding station. It is through Casino Square for the first time. Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, Räikkönen, Vettel, Bottas, Ricciardo, Verstappen, and then we have Carlos Sainz in P6 and Sergio Perez in P7. Into the hairpin for the first time. Vettel staying right with his teammate all the way around. It is single file for the most part through the hairpin. And it looks like the entire field has made it through the first sector of the lap unscathed. Very cool to see that here in Monaco. The car's throwing up some sparks as they head into the tunnel underneath the hotel for the first time and into the Nouvelle Chicane. It is Räikkönen leading Vettel. The gap is about 0.6 seconds at the moment. Max Verstappen already having a look at his teammate Daniel Ricciardo. And one of the Haas cars missed the apex of the chicane. I do believe that was Romain Grosjean. Through the second element of the swimming pool for the first time for the Ferraris, and now into La Rascasse corner. Räikkönen and Vettel making their way through there with no problems whatsoever, and now on to the start-finish straight to complete lap 1 of the Monaco Grand Prix. The order currently: Räikkönen, Vettel, Bottas, Verstappen, Ricciardo. Verstappen did manage to get around his teammate. Carlos Sainz in P6, P7 for Perez, followed by Grosjean, Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Fiat, Hamilton in P12, Stoffel Van Dorn 13th, so Hamilton has disposed of the McLaren already, followed by Massa, Ocon, Palmer, Stroll, and Ericsson, your top 18. Just confirming here. Yes, I did not see Button or Wehrlein cross the start-finish line, and they are both classified as out at this point. P19 Pascal Wehrlein classified out, P20 Jenson Button classified out. We have not seen what happened to them, however. Timing and scoring has reset itself. Fairline and Button now reclassified as in the race, P19 and 20, however, with one pit stop appended to them. I don't know what has happened with Fairline and Button there. Was there contact, or has Button already run into some sort of reliability issue? I do not know what has happened there with Button. Well, we'll try to follow that story. I don't see him on timing and scoring as of yet. Kimi Räikkönen, fastest lap, 117.914. Räikkönen currently running on those ultra softs, as is Vettel and Bottas and Verstappen and Ricciardo. Everybody running on those ultra soft tires all the way down to P18, Marcus Ericsson. And then the only other car running on the soft tires is Jenson Button. Everybody else on those ultra softs. DRS has been enabled here on lap 3. The gap between Räikkönen and Vettel at this time, 1.1 seconds, so Räikkönen is outside of that DRS range relative to his teammate. It is really, really cool to see Kimi Räikkönen leading the Monaco Grand Prix. I can now confirm that Fairline and Button are both running again. They are just coming through Rascasse at this time. US Terrestrial TV just showing a replay of the start here. We can see that McLaren of Jenson Button starting from the pit lane per plan, and then it appeared that Button and Fairline both made the pit stop at the end of lap 1 just so that they could be good for the regulations as having used both sets of tires. That, of course, does not bode well for McLaren's race strategy, because I'm not entirely sure that they're convinced they can even make it to the end of the race. But perhaps they will be there to pick up some places should there be some dramas warranting retirements later on. A replay on board with Lewis Hamilton from the start. Hamilton being very cautious off the line, as you might expect. He was able to make up that position over Stoffel Van Dorn through Saint Devat, however. Kimi Räikkönen setting up a very controlled pace at the moment. His last lap time, 117.072. That resets the fastest lap of the race. Expect those times only to drop as the fuel load begins to burn off of these cars. The gap between Räikkönen and Sebastian Vettel at this time is 1.8 seconds, and then it's 4 seconds back to Valtteri Bottas in P3. Bottas doing basically what I expected him to be doing. He is running his own race at the moment. Are Mercedes running a different strategy to Ferrari in the hopes of leapfrogging them in the pit stops? Perhaps. However, Bottas just minding his own business at the moment, looking after his tires. Jonathan, hello. Working lap 5 here of the race. Absolutely wonderful stuff so far in this Monaco Grand Prix. It never disappoints. And as I speak, Sebastian Vettel now sets the fastest lap of the race, a 117.044. The gap between he and Räikkönen still 1.6 seconds at this time. Yes, that Ferrari is really on fire with the pace here. I did not expect them to be this fast. I certainly did not expect to see 112s in qualifying, but there it is, and those Ferraris are being consistent at this point. They are pulling away. Yes, that point about Mercedes struggling a bit here, I think most of us thought that they would, and it does stem from that long wheelbase. Mercedes have the longest wheelbase of any car this year, and yes, around a very tight circuit like Monaco, the longer your car is, the more mass has to shift in its momentum, and therefore a really tight turn is not as possible when you've got a longer wheelbase. Think about it this way. It takes a lot more effort and a lot more time to turn a cruise ship, for example, than it does a speedboat. You've just got more mass, you've got more area that needs to be shifting in its attitude, and it just takes longer. Not to mention that you're going to put more loading into the tires, mechanically speaking. A longer wheelbase is better for aero, yes, and that's why I believe Mercedes have gone in that direction, but in terms of mechanical grip, it's just more loading that goes through the suspension and goes through the tires, and it's kind of a nightmare around a place like this. Meanwhile, Kimi Räikkönen resetting the fastest lap of the race, a 1:16.666. So we have now pulled up about a second in lap time already, working lap 8 of the Monaco Grand Prix. The pace here is going to be rather quick. Meanwhile, Max Verstappen looks to be harrying Valtteri Bottas. We'll see if the Dutchman is able to challenge Bottas for P3. My money is on him. We do know that whenever Verstappen sees an opportunity to make up a position, he will take it full force. So we'll see if that Mercedes has any ability to battle with the Red Bull. I think in theory Bottas should maintain the position, but we are talking about Max Verstappen here, and he stops at nothing in his pursuit of more points. In terms of Van Dorn being able to score points today, I think it is possible. Van Dorn currently running in P13 behind Lewis Hamilton. However, there could be some dramas up the front, as well as in the midfield here, particularly between drivers like Sainz, Perez, and Grosjean. So if that were to happen, Van Dorn could well be within a shout of scoring some points here. Meanwhile, at the front, Räikkönen continues to lead from Sebastian Vettel, who continues to lead from Valtteri Bottas. The gap between Vettel and Räikkönen now come down to 2.3 seconds. Sebastian Vettel goes purple in Sector 1 with a 20.146. Are we going to see fastest lap reset now by Sebastian Vettel? Räikkönen currently holds it. Tahmid, hello. The camera is still following Max Verstappen and Valtteri Bottas as they head through the Nouvelle Chicane. Verstappen is gaining on Bottas just incrementally here. Meanwhile, Vettel goes purple in Sector 2. I do believe we are about to see fastest lap reset. Räikkönen currently had it with a 1:16.594, and then immediately Vettel resets it with a 1:16.421. The gap 2.1 seconds between Räikkönen and Vettel. The pace is continuing to increase here on lap 10. Jensen Button complaining about some sort of mild vibration along the front axle of the car. He's not particularly worried about it, just letting the team know, hey, by the way, something's up here. Button currently running P20 and last. JMT, hello. Yes, why Hamilton did not start on the Super Softs, nobody really knows except for Mercedes and Hamilton, but I think they were trying to take the gamble of Hamilton being able to take some positions off the start. I don't know why they would do that, considering overtaking around this place is what it is. I personally would have wanted to try to go longer than the guys around me, but I'm not the Mercedes strategist. Perhaps they have an ace up their sleeve. Meanwhile, up at the front, the gap between Vettel and Raikkonen maintaining itself at 2.1 seconds. That gap has been stable for the last 2 or 3 laps or so. The Ferraris both running in the mid-116s, 116.7s for both of the Ferraris. Meanwhile, Bottas behind, running 116.8s. Bottas continues to drop back. The gap now 6 seconds between Raikkonen and Bottas. Verstappen maintaining his gap within 2 seconds of Valtteri Bottas. However, Verstappen does appear to have abandoned his charge, at least for the moment. Working lap 12. There is a question now starting to come into my mind of when the pit stops are going to be. We know that the tires this year tend not to degrade too much. However, Raikkonen and Vettel are both running on those ultra softs. Meanwhile, Raikkonen just resets the purple time in Sector 1, so his tires are still in good shape, but when will those pit stops be? How long can these ultrasofts go before the pace starts to fall off of them? At this point, we do not appear to be there. However, it will be interesting to see what Ferrari does. Who comes in first, and then who comes out first? So we'll see what the pit strategy is going to be from Ferrari. Will we see team orders here? I know it sounds inconceivable at this point, but Sebastian Vettel is higher placed in the championship than Kimi Raikkonen, and with Lewis Hamilton currently running outside the points, will Ferrari do something to leapfrog Vettel over Raikkonen to maximize the impact he can get on Lewis Hamilton today? I don't know. I don't want to start to get into an Austria 2001-2002 situation here, because if Kimi Raikkonen can win this race, I would love for Kimi Raikkonen to win this race. We're a long way from the end, however, but I do just want to sort of plant that seed in everybody's minds. Will Ferrari do something a little sneaky in terms of team orders? We'll see. Race control now saying that there is a 5-second penalty for Pascal Wehrlein. He was released in an unsafe manner in the pit lane. Jenson Button was complaining about that over the radio. I saw the replay. I agree. Wehrlein was released rather unsafely. 5-second penalty for Wehrlein. Now the world feed showing that replay between Wehrlein and Button. Wehrlein was released directly into the path of Jenson Button in the pit lane. So yes, I do believe that is a warranted and appropriate penalty. Meanwhile, at the front, the Ferraris are still holding station, running in the mid-116s. Raikkonen with a 16.6, Vettel with a 16.8. The gap is 2.2 seconds. Even the gap has been very stable. Ferrari running an absolutely textbook race at this time. Odd radio exchange between Red Bull and Verstappen. Red Bull are asking Max what the relative pace between he and Bottas is, as if Red Bull can't see that on timing and scoring for themselves. However, Verstappen replying to them, why are you asking me? Can't you see that? Vettel goes purple in Sector 2 with a 35.6. The gap now between Raikkonen and Vettel, 1.8 seconds. Vettel resets fastest lap, a 1:16.197. 1.8 seconds the gap between Raikkonen and Vettel. Vettel is gaining ever so slightly now on his teammate, who maintains the race lead. Is this indicative of pit stops coming, however? Vettel resetting that fastest lap at a 1:16.1. Raikkonen still running in the 16.6s. Will Raikkonen pick up the pace on this lap? So far, he is a tenth slower than Vettel in Sector 1. As they come down into the tunnel and then head into Sector 3, we'll see what the split is. The Ferrari's now coming down into the Nouvelle Chicane at the exit of the tunnel. We'll have a look at the sector times. Sector 2 is not particularly great for either Ferrari driver, a 36.1 for Raikkonen and a 35.9 for Vettel. The gap has now come down a further 1.4 seconds. 1.4 is the gap between Raikkonen and Vettel as they head into the final two corners of the lap. Is Vettel attempting a charge on his teammate here? The lap times. Raikkonen a 1:16.978, Vettel a 1:16.562. The gap is now 1.5 seconds. Why has Vettel suddenly sped up? Is a pit stop coming, or is this Vettel's appeal to the team to let him pass? And Raikkonen responds by going purple in Sector 1 with the 20.053. We'll follow this. The Ferrari's just playing a little bit of a cat and mouse game at the front of the field. We have yellow flags displayed. And the yellows have been stubbed down. Not entirely sure what happened there. Raikkonen 35.952 Sector 2. I'm not entirely sure if that was hampered by the yellow flags, however. Track surface slippery in Sector 5, according to Race Control. I'm not entirely sure where Sector 5 is around this lap. We are waiting for any indication of a car stopped on track. Yellow now in Sector 9. Is somebody leaking oil? Nico Hülkenberg has pulled off. Yes, Nico Hülkenberg has pulled off through Poitiers, right at the entrance of the tunnel where that escape road is, very close to where Ayrton Senna actually crashed in 1988. Smoke coming out from the back of Hülkenberg's Renault. That must be an oil leak of some sort, therefore making the track slippery. I do not believe that this warrants a safety car intervention. However, double waved yellow should be able to cover that Renault in that runoff zone. Force India dropping into the pits for Sergio Perez, just in case there was going to be a safety car. However, I don't think that's going to happen. But Perez now with the pit stop. He is running on the ultra soft tires again. Perez running on the super softs. Timing and scoring had not reset itself. We still have those waved yellows through Poitiers. Just waiting to see them stub down. I don't think there's going to be much of a problem removing that Renault. However, Nico Hülkenberg becomes our first retirement of this 2017 Monaco Grand Prix on lap 17. Those waved yellows have been stubbed down now through Poitiers. The entire track is green once again. We'll now resume watching that cat and mouse game between the Ferraris at the front of the grid. Bottas still 6.7 seconds behind Kimi Räikkönen. Max Verstappen 2.1 seconds behind Valtteri Bottas. Working lap 20. Now double waved yellows back in that Sector 9 zone. That is through Poitiers once again. Are they still trying to recover that Renault? Not entirely sure what's going on here. The marshals are usually very, very quick at clearing stricken cars from this circuit. Perhaps that is just a particularly bad spot. Double waved yellows have been stubbed down again. Perhaps they're just being a little bit cautious. Meanwhile, fading into the realms of obscurity in this race is Lewis Hamilton. He is currently running in P10. That's the final points-paying position. He is 2 seconds behind Daniel Kvyat in P9, and he is a full 34 seconds behind Kimi Räikkönen in the race lead. Meanwhile, up at the front of the field, Valtteri Bottas resets fastest Sector 1 time, 20.019. Comparatively, Kimi Räikkönen running at a 20.054. We'll watch that pace. Will Bottas be able to make any inroads on Sebastian Vettel? Currently that gap is just about 5 seconds. We will see. Ferraris through Sector 2, 35.8, both of them. What does Bottas do? He does a 35.9. Okay, so Bottas not really gaining on aggregate on Sebastian Vettel in front. Meanwhile, cameras following Lewis Hamilton. At least he's getting some TV time, and at least he's getting 1 point as he runs right now, working the end of lap 20 coming into the start of lap 21. Kimi Räikkönen still being absolutely metronomic there at the front. The gap is 1.6 seconds between he and Sebastian Vettel, P1 and 2. Yes, in terms of this engine formula, of course we have had it since 2014. They are ridiculously expensive. And it's not just because, well, it's Formula One and it needs to be expensive. It's because the technology that these cars are using basically is used nowhere else. So they have had to spend so much money developing bespoke systems just for Formula One, and they wanted this technology to be road relevant. It's not road relevant at all. I don't know of a single road car that has an MGU-H, for example. So if they were looking for road relevance, they did not find it. If anything, they just made it more irrelevant. I don't think we're going to see an MGU-H on a road car for at least the next 20 years. So maybe it's a test bed for something in the future, but it's nowhere in the near future. I think that the solution to this problem is to return to the 2007 to 2013 spec V8s, get rid of this hybrid nonsense because it's just too heavy and too expensive, bring back refueling, keep the slick tires, perhaps make them a little bit higher deg, but not much more than they are because we're getting good consistent pace now from these tires. So bring back the V8s, bring back refueling, get rid of the hybrids, that's about it. You can even keep DRS if you do all of those things. My favorite Formula One era is the early 90s because you had such diversity in terms of car design. You had some teams running V8s, some were running V10s, some were running V12s. Even all the way up to 1996, you had some teams running manual gearboxes, H-pattern manual gearboxes, as well as the semi-automatic units that we're used to today. So I would love to see Formula One cultivate an environment that allows a diversity of technology, that would also allow more teams into the sport, because if you wanted to run, let's say, a manual gearbox, even though I don't think it would be competitive now, I think you would allow the opportunity for more teams that perhaps don't have as much money into the sport, and of course, whenever there are more cars on the grid, it's better. If you got back into the V10s and V12s, sure, do it. If a team wants to run a V10 or wants to run a V12, let them do it. I don't think it's a smart idea to standardize the powertrains because, again, it takes away from that technical diversity that I was talking about. And I think it's really cool to look back at the 90s and look at a team like Jordan, for example, which was able to be competitive on occasion with teams like Ferrari. Jordan running a V8 engine, a manual gearbox, Ferrari running a V12 engine and a semi-automatic gearbox, yet Jordan on a few occasions managed to beat a Ferrari on track. So, yes, that's something I would like to see again. Meanwhile, at the sharp end of the field, the gap between Raikkonen and Vettel has come down to just 1.1 seconds. Raikkonen's last time a 1:16.968. Vettel's last lap time a 1:16.741. Are we coming down to pit stops now? Or are we coming up to Vettel overtaking his teammate? We are about to see. They are coming down the start-finish straight. We'll wait for the gap. Gap 1.1 seconds holding station there for the Ferraris. Hamilton on the radio saying, "Does the car seem okay? Grip is poor, handling is all over the place." Not entirely sure what is up with Lewis Hamilton this weekend, but after FP2, it seemed like the rest of his weekend absolutely collapsed, and of course it culminated in that disastrous qualifying effort. He would have made Q3 had it not been for Stoffel Van Dorn's crash. However, Lewis Hamilton just not at all in command of that Mercedes. I would not expect to see a retirement at this point from Hamilton, because everything does seem to be okay on the car, and he is running in the points. However, Hamilton not happy still with that Mercedes. Raikkonen and Vettel going tit for tat. In Sector 1, Raikkonen a 20.3, Vettel a 20.4. Sector 2, 36.2 for Raikkonen, 36.0 for Vettel. We'll wait for the Sector 3 times. The gap is 1.098 seconds now between Raikkonen and Vettel as they come down start-finish. Raikkonen a 117.236, Vettel a 117.216. The gap now 0.8 of a second into Sandoval. Raikkonen and Vettel now coming up to lap Jenson Button and Pascal Wehrlein already on lap 26. The pace is starting to fall off at the sharp end of the field, however. 117s now, both of the Ferraris. They've been running in the 116s. Raikkonen already asking about the blue flags for Button and Wehrlein. Raikkonen, of course, will want to dispose of these back markers as quickly as possible. Of course, they will let him by at their nearest possible opportunity as they come through the swimming pool now. I'm still not seeing any waved blue flags at this point for Jenson Button. Raikkonen about 1.5 seconds behind Button on the road at the moment. Still not seeing any waved blue flags through Portier. And as I speak, now we do have waved blue flags for Jenson Button. Expect to see him let Kimi by. Jenson Button has moved over and allowed both of the Ferraris through quite wisely. The Ferraris now coming up to lap Pascal Wehrlein. They still have a few seconds on the road back to Wehrlein. Bottas laps Button now. He's now clear to pursue Sebastian Vettel. The gap has come down considerably between Vettel and Bottas. That is now 1.7 seconds. The gap at the front between Raikkonen and Vettel has increased slightly to 1.6 seconds. Bottas making some big gains on Sebastian Vettel. He gained over a second on that previous lap. Of course, the Ferraris were negotiating Jenson Button, putting him a lap down, but Bottas did that rather expeditiously, and now the gap is 1.7 seconds between Vettel and Bottas. Yes, I do agree. We do need to get rid of these ridiculous penalties for drivetrain component changes. It's not fair, honestly. It penalizes the driver when a driver has not made a mistake. It's not a driver's fault that an engine blows up or an MGU-H motor generator unit blows up or whatever. So I don't think you should penalize a driver for a component failure. I think the penalty is already there for the team anyway, because they have to put out the resources for new parts, and then they have to spend the man-hours fitting the new parts. So, obviously, reliability is still the name of the game, whether or not you have to pay a penalty on track for it. So, the teams have every incentive to maintain reliability and to pursue better reliability as much as possible. I just don't think it's fair to make a driver directly pay for it. Yes, I did not see Verstappen go off there at the chicane. I do see, however, that he has resumed running. Now, you bring up a good point there. Lewis Hamilton, I'm not entirely sure what goes on in his head, but when things are not running right for him, he just goes into a very dark place mentally, and no matter what happens after he encounters a problem during a race weekend, he's never really able to return to some good form. So, I don't know if it's just a sort of mental block that he has to deal with time and time again, but we have seen this before from Lewis Hamilton. He runs into some problems, particularly during free practice, and then he's just off the boil for the rest of the weekend. He seems to be very particular about settling into a rhythm, and when it doesn't go quite right, he's just off kilter for the rest of the weekend, and we're definitely seeing that again here. Meanwhile, at the front, big disparity now in lap times between Raikkonen and Vettel. Raikkonen's last lap, a 1:17.105. Vettel's last lap, a 1:16.636. The gap is 1.6 seconds from Raikkonen to Vettel. Both of the Ferraris now running in the 117s. That last lap time for Raikkonen, 1:17.074. Vettel, 1:17.166. The gap holding pretty steady at 1.4 seconds. Not entirely sure on exactly how long these tires can last, but we are expecting a one-stop strategy from most, if not all, of the teams today. Raikkonen seems to be losing most of his time in Sector 1. He is 0.2 slower through Sector 1 than Vettel on this lap. Sector 2, wow, that was a big gap in Sector 2. Raikkonen through Sector 2, 36.396. Vettel, 35.977. The gap now 0.9 of a second heading through La Rascasse. Verstappen drops into the pits. He's the first of our front runners to pit. Let's see this Red Bull pit stop here. Verstappen on to the super softs now. Good stop by Red Bull. We'll see when Ferrari blinks. I have to believe it's going to be soon. Mercedes now telling Bottas to get on with the program. I have to believe that they're stopping soon as well, and I also have to believe that the Ferraris are going to be stopping soon. We are working lap 33, and they are still running on those ultra-soft tires with which they started the race. Yes, Red Bull did have the tires ready for Max Verstappen. This was a planned pit stop after all. Of course, that's an allusion to what happened to Daniel Ricciardo when he was leading this race last year. He pulled into the pits, and Red Bull were not at all ready for him, and he lost all sorts of time in that stop, and it most likely cost him the win here at Monaco. I don't think Ricciardo has ever been able to let that go. Bottas now in the pit lane. Mercedes also going on to the super softs for Bottas. Slick stop by the Mercedes mechanics. Will Verstappen be able to leapfrog Bottas here on the pit stops? I don't think so. He has not been able to leapfrog just strictly by the stop time. Of course, someone coming out of the pits, provided that there's a big enough gap to the guy behind, has a slight advantage because the pit out actually cuts through Saint-Devant. They do not have to go all the way around the corner on the proper apex, therefore a slight advantage on the pit exit here at Monaco. Now, how is Bottas with getting these tires up to temperature? Verstappen's tires are already up to temperature. Will Verstappen be able to do anything to the Finn in front of him? Raikkonen, race leader, in the pits. Vettel inherits the lead for the moment. Expecting Ferrari to go on to the super softs. Meanwhile, Daniel Ricciardo resets fastest lap of the race, 1:16.117. Ferrari onto the super softs with Raikkonen. Good stop. Daniel Ricciardo also leapfrogging Kimi Räikkönen on that stop. Ricciardo has yet to stop, however, as does Vettel. Vettel, purple, sector 2, 35.610. He has responded to Raikkonen's stop. Will he be able to pull out enough of a gap to come out with the lead? Raikkonen is behind Jenson Button on the road, and Button has now let him through very smartly. Ricciardo resets fastest lap, 1:16.093. Both he and Vettel, of course, have yet to stop. The gap between Raikkonen and Ricciardo now 14.4 seconds. Sebastian Vettel going purple in Sector 1, 20.014. How much longer can Vettel stay out? So far, he is still on the pace. Kimi currently running in P3. 19.5 seconds behind down to Ricciardo on the road. 19.4 seconds behind Sebastian Vettel. He is 14.4 seconds behind Daniel Ricciardo. Raikkonen goes purple in Sector 2, 35.604. We'll see what his ultimate lap time is. Marcus Ericsson, meanwhile, in the pits from P17. Vettel, purple in Sector 1, 19.889. Ricciardo resets fastest lap yet again, a 1:16.019. We will follow Vettel's sector times here around this lap. We are expecting him to pit anytime soon. This is the dynamic for the eventual race win right here. Raikkonen, 19.2 seconds behind Vettel, 14.2 seconds behind Ricciardo. Vettel, purple in Sector 2 with a 35.419. What can Raikkonen do in response in Sector 2? $35.6704 for Kimi Räikkönen. That is 0.2 slower through Sector 2. Meanwhile, Vettel through Sector 3 at 20.279. Vettel resets fastest lap a 1:15.587. That is a half a second faster than the previous fastest lap. That is some tremendous pace from Sebastian Vettel. If Vettel wants to win this Grand Prix, he is doing everything he needs to do that right here and right now. Vettel still going purple through Sector 1, 19.747. He has a lot of pace. Sainz and Magnussen in the pits. Sainz onto the super softs. And I believe Magnussen also going to those super softs. Meanwhile, at the front of the grid, Sebastian Vettel again fastest lap, 1:15.587, and he's currently gone purple in sectors 1 and 2. Vettel obviously on course to reset fastest lap yet again, 1:15.238, fastest lap for Sebastian Vettel. Daniel Ricciardo in the pits. Ricciardo knows what it's like not to have a Monaco pit stop go well. However, that one was very good. Onto the super soft tires for Daniel Ricciardo. Raikkonen passes Ricciardo as he is in the pits. The gap now between Vettel and Raikkonen, 0.286 seconds. Vettel has pretty much all of the time he needs to get in and out ahead of his teammate. Let's see if that transpires. When will Vettel pit? He is still putting down incredible lap times here. 1:15.238, fastest lap of the race still for Sebastian Vettel. Vettel has been called into the pits, and he is in the pits right now. How does this stop go for Sebastian Vettel? It is all to play for right here, right now. Vettel into the box, off with the old wheels, on with the new wheels. Super softs for Sebastian Vettel. Great stop by Ferrari. What is that delta to Kimi Räikkönen? I think Vettel has enough time in hand to be able to get out in front of his teammate, but will it happen? Vettel off the limiter, now through the pit out. I do believe Vettel has done everything he needs to do. It's close, but again, that pit out cuts through the apex of Saint-Devote, and Vettel resumes in the lead. Official lead change here at the Monaco Grand Prix. Sebastian Vettel leads Kimi Räikkönen. The interval is 0.938 between them. Esteban Ocon with a left rear puncture. Not entirely sure where he is on track. Will that affect anybody up front? I do not believe so. And we're waiting here for the lap times to normalize now after the pit stops. Currently, the complexion at the sharp end of the field looks like this. Vettel, his last lap time, a 1:18.650. Raikkonen's last lap time, a 1:17.709. The gap 2.3 seconds behind Vettel is Raikkonen. Grosjean in the pits, going on to the soft tires, as we would expect. Good stop by the Haas boys. Haas, of course, sporting a slightly different livery this year, or this race rather. They have gotten rid of the red markings on their car and replaced it with white and gray. The rationale behind that livery change for the Haas was simply to make the Haas branding a bit more visible on television. I thought the car looked fine as it was, but that's what they've decided to do, and it still doesn't look all that bad. Things have now normalized at the front. Vettel, his last lap time, a 1:16.190. Raikkonen's last lap time, a 1:17.673. The gap between Vettel and Raikkonen now 3.8 seconds. I am expecting them now to hold station for the foreseeable future. The news continues to get worse for Kimi Räikkönen. The gap between he and Vettel now 4.7 seconds. Räikkönen consistently losing time to his teammate. Meanwhile, down to Ricciardo, 6.1 seconds behind Kimi Räikkönen. However, he is lapping slightly more quickly than Räikkönen. Räikkönen's last lap time of 1:17.293. Ricciardo's last lap time of 1:17.191. Magnussen and Palmer in the pits. I'm not seeing anybody setting purple sector times at this point. Of course, these tires have to last for a whole bunch more laps, so I think everybody just being cautious for the moment. I am not expecting any more pit stops, at least from the front runners. These super soft tires should well be able to take us to the end of the race. Palmer out on the super soft tires, Magnussen out on the ultra softs. Stoffel Van Dorn as well in the pits. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton has made his way up into 6th place. He has yet to stop. He is still running on those ultra soft tires, which are now 43 laps old. Hamilton has been complaining about the handling dynamics of that Mercedes all weekend. However, it is apparently quite gentle on those ultra soft tires, so I'm not entirely sure if the car is really at fault this weekend. Meanwhile, at the front, the gap now 5.8 seconds between Vettel and Räikkönen. Vettel's last lap time of 1:16.387. Räikkönen's last lap time of 1:17.046. 6.1 seconds is the gap between Räikkönen and Ricciardo for P2 and P3. And completing that McLaren storyline, Van Dorn resumes in P10, so points paying position now for McLaren. If it happens, that'll be their first points of the year. The other McLaren, Jenson Button, P19, and the last car running. At this point, everybody up to P14 has been lapped at least once, and Nico Hülkenberg is out of the race. He retired on lap 15. Sebastian Vettel really getting on with the program again. His last lap time of 1:16.566. Kimi Räikkönen's last lap of 1:17.493. Almost a second quicker per lap now is Sebastian Vettel over his teammate. Meanwhile, we are still awaiting a pit stop from Mercedes for Lewis Hamilton. Mercedes finally calling Hamilton into the pits where he currently is. 45 laps on those ultra-soft tires. Incredible driving from Lewis Hamilton to make those tires last that long. Let's see this pit stop from Mercedes. How slick is it? On to the super softs now for Hamilton. Good stop by the Mercedes boys. Hamilton is good to go for the end. Hamilton rejoins in P7, it looks like. 2.4 seconds back is Romain Grosjean in P8. Sebastian Vettel coming up to lap Kevin Magnussen and Felipe Massa within a couple of laps' time, I am sure. The gap now, Vettel to Raikkonen, 8.3 seconds. Raikkonen has a further 4.8 seconds back to Daniel Ricciardo for P3, so Raikkonen does appear to be consolidating second place at the moment. Meanwhile, the gap Bottas to Verstappen, now 1.2 seconds. They are coming up now to lap to traffic. Marcus Ericsson in front of them on the road. Will Verstappen be able to pounce on Bottas through this lap traffic into Casino Square? We shall see. Yes, Hamilton has been putting in a rather gritty performance today. He has made up a whole bunch of positions, having started from P13. He's currently running in P7 with his pit stop out of the way. I don't think it's inconceivable that we might see him challenging for P6 by the end. Carlos Sainz currently owns P6. He is 9.3 seconds up the road from Lewis Hamilton at this point. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel continuing to lap in the mid-116s. Kimi Raikkonen, his last lap time of 117.015. Vettel's last lap time of 116.371. 9.7 seconds now, the gap between Vettel and Raikkonen. Vettel is in Casino Square at this moment. Raikkonen is just coming up Beau Rivage. Yes, that gap between Bottas and Verstappen holding station for the most part 0.7 seconds. However, down the straights, you have got quite a disparity in straight line speed here from that Mercedes relative to the Red Bull. Red Bull certainly down on engine power, and of course the team's running pretty much maximum downforce for this race, so yes, that is the equalizer here. Engine power. Mercedes certainly have the upper hand over that Renault engine in the Red Bull. JMT, I do agree. Istanbul was an absolutely great circuit. I am very sad that we no longer go there. It was the only one of the Hermann Tilke circuits that I thought was truly awesome, but nope, we don't go there. Just like we don't go to Monaco, just like we don't go to Imola. So many great circuits that Formula One has vacated in the last decade. That is, in my opinion, the biggest problem for this sport. We don't respect the heritage of the sport as much as we used to, and I think that's a problem. Thankfully, we still go to places like Monaco, Silverstone, Spa, but you've got to have Imola on the calendar, and you need a French Grand Prix as well on the calendar. That is returning for 2018. There will be a race at Paul Ricard, which of course is a historic circuit in Formula One as well, but yes, I have greatly missed the French Grand Prix, and I have missed the San Marino Grand Prix as well at Imola. In terms of really improving the lap times, I think we have done quite a good job at that this year, but if you really want these cars to be spectacularly fast and to be able to follow each other through corners, I think you need to come back to ground effect. That's one area that Formula One has not played with since the 1980s, and I think it's now time that we could have ground effect work again. The cars are a lot safer now. They were concerned about ground effect making the cornering speeds too high the first time in the 80s, so they banned those sliding skirts, and then ultimately they banned underbody tunnels. But we need ground effect back. I think that would be the solution to our problems. We see IndyCar running ground effect. We'll see the Indy 500 later on today, and you'll see those cars being able to follow very closely at 230 miles an hour through the corners at Indianapolis. So ground effect is the way to go. In terms of the engine regs, I would love to see them be entirely open. I would want V8s, V10s, V12s, even V6 turbos running at the same time out on track, but at the moment that's not what we have. We're getting reports that there is a dislodged manhole cover through Saint-Devote. It is causing some punctures for some people, namely Esteban Ocon. I've yet to see any pictures of said manhole cover. I don't know if it's completely dislodged or if it's just lifting a little bit. When these cars pass over the ground, they do exert a considerable suction onto the road surface, and that is enough to start pulling things up off of the road surface. Normally, things like manhole covers and storm drains are welded down for a race on a street circuit. Perhaps one of those welds has broken loose. We'll see if there is the need for any sort of intervention to secure that manhole cover. I remember in the 2005 Chinese Grand Prix, there was a dislodged drain cover on the circuit there, and it actually caused Juan Pablo Montoya to drop out of the race. Such was the damage it caused to his McLaren. Meanwhile, at the sharp end of the field, the gap now between Vettel and Raikkonen is 11.6 seconds. Vettel's last lap time of 1:16.025. Raikkonen's last time of 1:16.465. Raikkonen still has 2.8 seconds in hand over Daniel Ricciardo. However, that gap is coming down. We'll see if Ricciardo can mount a challenge to Raikkonen for that second place spot. It would depend on exactly what sort of situation is going on with that manhole cover. I've yet to see a picture of anything through Sound of Vought, but if they do need to secure that manhole cover, I would say at very least that would necessitate the safety car, if not a red flag. Meanwhile, looking for the ultimate pace out there on the racetrack, it is actually Lewis Hamilton. His last lap time was a 1:15.847. Unfortunately, he is 48.6 seconds down the road from Sebastian Vettel in P1. He is, however, only 2.1 seconds behind Carlos Sainz. Will Hamilton be able to take P6 by the end of the race? I certainly think it's possible because we do have 20 laps left. Meanwhile, at the front, Sebastian Vettel, his last lap time of 1:16.103. Kimi Raikkonen's last lap time of 1:16.343. The gap between he and Vettel is now 12.7 seconds. Yes, Jensen Button saying that the track is breaking up on the exit of Saint Devote. I'm still to see any actual good pictures of that area exiting Saint Devote. I don't know exactly what the state of the track is. Certainly we have had a few drivers complain about it already. 19 laps to go. What will they do if there is a repair needed to that area of the circuit? And yes, that point on the Assetto Corsa Ready to Race pack, I have to agree. The Toyota TS040, it is actually a rather enjoyable car. I find it much more enjoyable than the Audi, simply because I think the Toyota is a bit more drivable because it has a petrol engine versus the diesel engine in the Audi, and I think it's a little bit better with using its energy recovery. Now seeing some pictures of Saint-Devote, there is a strip of tarmac. It looks like it is a patch in the road that is starting to break up quite a bit. And apparently this section of Turn 1 was actually resurfaced last night. So that is some brand new tarmac down there. They do resurface these roads in Monte Carlo every year before the Grand Prix. However, that bit of resurfacing apparently not quite up to standard. It is starting to break up. It does not look that severe at the moment, and I don't see a drain cover anywhere that is dislodged, but they are showing some track breakup there. Double waved yellows now in force in Sector 9. That is through Poitiers and the entrance of the tunnel. What has happened there? That is the same point where Nico Hülkenberg went off before. Still waiting to see what's going on. Safety car deployed. Race control states safety car deployed. Wow, we have an absolutely frightening accident through Poitiers. A car is sitting on its left side wheels, 90 degrees, cockpit side facing the barrier. I cannot identify the car at this time. We have an absolutely frightening scene at Poitiers. I cannot identify the car. I want to hold on identifying this car. The cockpit is facing in toward the barrier. Car up on its left side wheels. Timing and scoring showing Pascal Wehrlein. It is Pascal Wehrlein up on the barrier there. Cockpit is facing the barrier, up against the barrier. The rear wing is off of the car as far as I can tell. I cannot completely assess the damage to that Sauber. Safety car deployed has picked up Sebastian Vettel in the race lead. I cannot make any identifications as to the state of the car or Pascal Wehrlein. We await more pictures. Marshals are motioning to all of the drivers as they pass by under safety car to pass by very cautiously, and the marshals are not at this time making any efforts to extricate the driver or to right the car. I am expecting the medical team to be out very quickly here. I do not know at this time whether or not Pascal Wehrlein is still in the car. Meanwhile, in the runoff area after the Nouvelle chicane, Jenson Button has parked the McLaren. I do not know if he was involved in any potential contact with Pascal Wehrlein. It appears it may be the case. We will wait to see what happens. We have heard radio from Pascal Wehrlein to Sauber. He says he is okay. Wehrlein says he is okay over the radio. The car still sitting on its left side wheels there at the exit of Poitiers up against the barrier. The extrication team and the medical team have come in to help him. We're now seeing the replay. It was indeed contact with the left front of Jenson Button that catapulted Pascal Wehrlein up 90 degrees on the left side wheels into the barrier. On board with Pascal Wehrlein now. The car jumps up into the barrier, and then the camera digs itself into the barrier there, the branding on the side of the barrier. Jenson Button retiring with left front wheel damage from that contact. Yes, that is a very scary incident indeed. The car has now been righted. Fairline's car has been righted. And it does appear that Fairline will be able to exit the car very quickly. Definitely good to see that Fairline is apparently okay enough to be talking on the radio. Pascal Fairline has climbed out of the Sauber under his own power. That is good to see. Yeah, guys, anybody who's going to make a comment like that is going to be banned. So, hence he's been banned. That sort of talk has absolutely no place anywhere. Again, to recap here, we had a rather frightening accident involving Jenson Button and Pascal Fairline. Fairline found himself tipped into the barriers. The car was sitting on its left side wheels, the cockpit facing perpendicular to the barrier. However, Fairline has been able to climb out of the car under his own power once the marshals managed to get the car sitting on its wheels again. Very good to see. We've seen an accident like that before, and it did not end nearly as well. Very good to see Pascal Fairline apparently uninjured in that absolutely terrifying accident. Lance Stroll, currently classified P15, one lap down. Lapped cars may now overtake cars 20, 30, 18, 9, and 31. We have no indications at this time of when the safety car may be recalled. I do expect it to be out for at least another 3 laps, as the lapped cars can now unlap themselves. I do assume that there is still considerable work happening at Portier. at this time as they run. P1 for Sebastian Vettel, followed by Raikkonen, Ricciardo, Bottas, Verstappen, Sainz, Hamilton, Grosjean, Kvyat, and Van Dorn, your top 10. Van Dorn still in that points-paying position. We're working lap 65 of 78 behind the safety car here at Monaco as work continues down at Poitiers to remove that stricken Sauber. Jenson Button was also involved in that incident with Pascal Wehrlein. Button has retired with left front suspension damage. In addition to the safety car, we're now seeing double-waved yellows in Sector 1 in Turn 1. Saint-Devote, Marcus Ericsson has apparently stopped in Saint-Devote. Deadpool, the crash was not particularly big, but Pascal Wehrlein made contact with the left front of Jenson Button's car with the right rear of his own car, and that catapulted Wehrlein up into the barrier, cockpit side first. The cockpit and the roll hoop sitting perpendicularly at 90 degrees to the barrier. The onboard camera actually buried itself into that Armco Tech Pro barrier, and it was unclear from the initial pictures that we saw as to what Pascal Wehrlein's condition was, given the orientation of the car relative to the barrier. However, Wehrlein was able to climb out under his own power after the car was righted back onto its wheels. Meanwhile, Marcus Ericsson Sauber being craned away from Saint-Devote. And the double-waved yellows have now been stubbed down through Sector 1 and Saint-Devote. Ericsson says that he ran into the wall. World Feed cameras giving us another view of that breakup through Turn 1. There is considerable breakup happening, however, I do think it is still runnable. Safety car going to be coming in this lap as the World Feed shows Pascal Wehrlein walking back into the pit lane. In replay, Marcus Ericsson going off into the barrier, knocking off his front wing. The safety car was immediately behind him on the road. I think Ericsson was trying to unlap himself, and he may have been distracted by how close the safety car was to him on his rear, and it was enough to punt him into the barrier. Seeing the pictures through Poitiers, it does not appear that the Sauber is still there, and it does appear that the track is in a raceable condition. Awaiting the lights to go out on the safety car, and the race will resume on lap 67 of 78. Lights are now out on the safety car as they come through the swimming pool. Sebastian Vettel will now begin to back the pack up, and then he will choose the moment to get on the throttle and try to build a gap to his teammate Kimi Raikkonen, who is immediately behind him, followed by Max Verstappen. Followed by Daniel Ricciardo, excuse me. Vettel has now put the hammer down, and we are back racing here in Monaco. Working lap 67 of 78. As the green flags fly, the order is Vettel, Raikkonen, Ricciardo, Bottas, Verstappen, Carlos Sainz, Hamilton, Grosjean, Kvyat, and Stoffel Van Dorn. We have a yellow shown in Sector 1. And Stoffel Van Dorn has run into the barriers at Saint-Devote. Double-waved yellows now. Sector 1, Saint-Devote. Van Dorn is in the barrier and I believe out of the Monaco Grand Prix. That is a double retirement once again for McLaren Honda. Stoffel Van Dorn has crashed in Saint-Devote out of P10. McLaren were on for points. Double retirement now for McLaren Honda. There's double waved yellows affecting sectors 1 and 3 as Van Dorn is off in Saint-Devote. Van Dorn's car being craned away out of Saint-Devote. The track is now green once again. Double waved yellow stub down. At the front, Vettel leads Raikkonen by 2.1 seconds, followed by Ricciardo, Bottas, and Verstappen, your top 5. The gap between Vettel and Raikkonen has come down. The gap is now 1.8 seconds. Raikkonen is lapping faster than Sebastian Vettel. Vettel's last lap time a 122.102. Raikkonen's last lap a 121.399. The gap is exactly 2 seconds. Will Kimi be able to do anything about his teammate in these last 8 laps of the Monaco Grand Prix? We shall see. Raikkonen holding that gap at pretty much 2 seconds to Sebastian Vettel in front. Jonathan, it seemed that Stoffel just ran into the barriers at Saint-Devote. Sergio Perez was fighting with him. Stoffel had to take the wide line through Saint-Devote, and I think just the lower tire pressures and the lower brake temperatures caught him out. He could not find the grip again around the outside and found his way to the barrier. The gap at the front has now increased. Sebastian Vettel has 2.2 seconds over Kimi Raikkonen at this time. Last lap times for both of them, Vettel 119.298, Raikkonen 119.643. Sebastian Vettel has picked up the pace again. Gap now at the front, 2.4 seconds, Vettel to Raikkonen. It does appear that Vettel is now trying to consolidate that lead, albeit a small one at this point. 1.1 seconds behind Raikkonen is Daniel Ricciardo. Ricciardo actually made some considerable contact with the barriers before on that restart. However, it appears that Ricciardo's car is fine. Official word from race control, that incident between Wehrlein and Button will be investigated after the race. And as a public service announcement, voting for Driver of the Day is now open on f1.com/vote. If you want to vote for Driver of the Day, go ahead and do that. My driver of the day, I voted for Kimi Räikkönen. Seeing a yellow track in Sector 3. Very briefly, I think it's been subbed down. Don't know what caused that. That yellow flag was caused by contact between Ocon and Kvyat. Both drivers able to right themselves and continue. There is a little bit of debris down there in La Rascasse, however, I don't think it's going to cause any problems. Now double yellows in Sector 5, that is through Casino Square and into Massenet. I don't know what has caused that. I don't see anybody stopped. I see Daniel Kvyat stopped in Casino Square. Daniel Kvyat is stopped in Casino Square. I have to say that's probably due to that damage in his contact with Esteban Ocon. Kvyat is out of the car. The marshals are pushing it back into a run-out zone there in Casino Square. I do not think this is going to necessitate a safety car. Let's see that contact again in replay. Yes, that was pretty substantial contact. The floor on that Toro Rosso was completely destroyed there on the right-hand side. That was contact with Sergio Perez, who has made it into the pits. And he has resumed racing, has Sergio Perez. Lance Stroll in the pits as well. Perhaps he's picked up some debris there from Rascasse. We'll see if Stroll resumes. That incident between Perez and Kvyat will be investigated after the race. All the yellow flags have been stubbed down. We are back under completely green conditions here at Monaco. Lance Stroll appears to be retiring from this race. I saw him being turned rear first into the garage. 5 laps to go. Yes, Verstappen and Bottas are indeed running nose to tail rather. The gap between Bottas and Verstappen now 0.6 seconds. Meanwhile, at the front, the gap between Vettel and Raikkonen 3.6 seconds. Vettel's last lap time of 1:17.920. Raikkonen's last time 1:17.762. We are working lap 74 of 78. Vettel stamping his authority on this Grand Prix. His last lap time of 1:16.665. Compare that to Kimi Räikkönen's last lap time of 1:17.168. The gap 4.2 seconds now. Max Verstappen definitely sizing up Valtteri Bottas coming into the end of this race. 0.6 seconds is the gap still between those two. Verstappen, I have to believe, wants to try something before this race is over. We'll see if he can make anything stick. Working lap 76 of 78, coming down to the end here of this 2017 Monaco Grand Prix. Still waiting to see if anything can happen between Verstappen and Bottas. The gap now 0.9 of a second. Verstappen has DRS if he wants it. Yes, the Red Bull certainly at a disadvantage relative to the Mercedes, particularly in terms of straight line speed. There is a considerable horsepower gap between those two engines. Sergio Perez, fastest lap of the race down in P13, 1:15.017, fastest of all in Sector 2. Meanwhile, up the front, Vettel leads Raikkonen 5.2 seconds. Ricciardo follows Raikkonen at 0.9 seconds the gap. P4, Valtteri Bottas. P5, Max Verstappen. Meanwhile, the battle for P6 between Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton. 0.6 of a second, the gap between Sainz and Hamilton. Will Hamilton try anything in the closing laps of this race? I would caution him severely because he is in for a solid points finish after a dreadful start to the race here from P13 on the grid. Hamilton has put in a gritty drive. However, P6 is beckoning. Will Hamilton have anything for Carlos Sainz in the final two laps? Sebastian Vettel running all on his own out in front. 4.8 seconds he has behind him to his teammate. Sergio Perez resets fastest lap of the race. 1:14.820. Fastest in sectors 2 and 3. Lewis Hamilton radioed to Mercedes saying, "The battle is not over, guys." Perhaps he does want to try and get P6, but he has dropped back considerably now from Carlos Sainz. 2.2 seconds is that gap. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel has started his final lap. He's heading through Casino Square for the last time. Sebastian Vettel kept his head cool in the start of this race, and then when the pit stops came, he was able to take the lead of the Monaco Grand Prix, and since he has consolidated that lead to the tune of 4 seconds over his teammate Kimi Raikkonen. Heading down to the harbor side for the last time now for Sebastian Vettel through Poitiers and now entering the tunnel. A masterful drive today by both Ferrari drivers. Kimi Raikkonen, of course, taking his first pole position since the 2008 French Grand Prix, and Sebastian Vettel now here on to win the Monaco Grand Prix. It does appear he's gone through the Nouvelle Chicane for the last time, now coming up to the swimming pool complex. Sebastian Vettel now starting to take it easy as he approaches the last sector of the lap through the final element of the swimming pool, coming through to pass La Rascasse for the last time, to the cheers of the crowd there. Now through the final chicane onto the start-finish not so straight. Sebastian Vettel bringing the Ferrari home. Victory for Sebastian Vettel at the 2017 Monaco Grand Prix. He is followed home by teammate Kimi Raikkonen in P2, Daniel Ricciardo in P3, Valtteri Bottas P4, Max Verstappen in P5. We are waiting to see what happens with P6. Carlos Sainz has kept P6. Lewis Hamilton finishes 7th. Romain Grosjean 8th. Felipe Massa will come home to finish in 9th, and Kevin Magnussen will come home in 10th. A double points finish for Haas, the first time that they have done that so far in their Formula One tenure. Sebastian Vettel going through Casino Square here, saluting the marshals gathered by the side of the track. Sebastian Vettel certainly sounding very, very satisfied with that result. Ferrari's first win at Monaco for 16 years. That drought has been ended today. A 1-2 finish in the Principality for Ferrari. And another bit of character of the Monaco Grand Prix, you can hear in the background all of the yachts and the ships out further in the harbor sounding their horns in a salute to the race winner, Sebastian Vettel, being received famously as ever here in Monaco. The top 3 finishers will pull onto the start-finish straight to park in front of the Royal Box. That is the traditional Parc Fermé location for the podium finishers here in Monaco. The rest of the field will recover into the pit lane. Kimi Räikkönen already out of the car, parked in his P2 slot, and Sebastian Vettel comes to a stop alongside Daniel Ricciardo here. He switches the car off, and we are expecting a very jubilant Sebastian Vettel to jump out of this SF70H and say thank you to the wonderful crowd here assembled in Monaco. Sebastian Vettel holding his steering wheel aloft. Forza Ferrari! For the record, this is Ferrari's 90th 1-2 finish in a Formula One Grand Prix. Kimi Räikkönen not looking the happiest there. Perhaps he is thinking this race should have been his. However, when you look at the lap times, Sebastian Vettel was consistently faster all day long. Yes, it is always amazing to see just how fresh-faced these drivers always look after getting out of a car doing a Grand Prix distance. These guys are absolutely elite athletes in every sense of the word. A slightly new podium configuration here in Monaco for this year. Gone is the traditional street-level royal box. It has now been replaced by an elevated box alongside a new podium here at Monaco. However, I do believe that the overall atmosphere is unchanged. It certainly looks very cool. Top three finishers now on the podium. New podium procedure here in Monaco. Stand by for a very familiar combination to all of us, the German and Italian national anthems. Or perhaps not. The trophy presentation still comes before the anthems here in Monaco. His Serene Highness Prince Albert II awarding Sebastian Vettel the winner's trophy here for the 2017 Monaco Grand Prix. Her Serene Highness Princess Charlene awarding the second place trophy to Kimi Räikkönen. Daniel Ricciardo looking reasonably satisfied with his third place finish as well. Good drives by all of the men up there, of course. Now stand by for the anthems. Over here in the States, NBCSN has made the switch over to covering the post-race formalities. If you are wondering where it is and you are stateside, it is on NBCSN. The race was broadcast on NBC proper. Kimi Räikkönen looking a little bit glum there on the podium. He has every right to be proud of what he has done today. P2 in the Monaco Grand Prix is no mean feat, and of course he had that wonderful pole position yesterday. Kimi Räikkönen not wanting to get involved really with the podium celebrations. Not entirely sure you can blame him. This race, in many circumstances, really should have been his. However, Vettel was faster on the day. He simply was. Yes, you could argue that maybe Vettel staying out a bit longer in that first stint helped him significantly, but Vettel was quicker. Look at the lap board. He was faster. He was faster by a full second on many occasions per lap, so Vettel put in the better performance today, I have to say, but Kimi does look very glum indeed. And apparently, today's podium interviews are going to be conducted by one Nico Rosberg. This will be interesting to watch. Salinas, no, I am not a professor. I am a teacher, however. I work as a teacher of English for new immigrants to the United States, so yeah, I suppose I do have to be cognizant of what I am saying when I'm saying it, so that's where it comes from. Jonathan, thank you for that. Actually, you won't have to wait very long to come back for the next one. I am also going to be doing live commentary of the Indy 500 in just about 2 hours' time, so if you do want to come back, you do not have to wait all that long for it. Of course, this year at the Indy 500, the big storyline is Fernando Alonso. Of course, Fernando Alonso being one of the best Formula One drivers we've ever seen, and to see him doing so well already at Indy, he'll be starting 5th on the grid today. That is something that we all have to watch. If any of you are a little bit out of sync with me here, it's because we had a station switch here in the States. I have not yet seen the podium interviews. I'm sure that they've already concluded. I have yet to see them, however, so that's why I'm still being rather quiet and I haven't had anything to say about the interviews. Not seen them yet here stateside. Nico Rosberg indeed conducting those interviews, the world champion looking a little bit dumbfounded, I want to say. Certainly looks a little bit out of his element here, but Nico Rosberg with the interviews. Indeed, there was a wah from Sebastian Vettel. I think he spent a little bit too much time around Kimi. As we would expect, Sebastian Vettel being very complimentary toward the team here. Kimi definitely unable to hide his disappointment here in the post-race interviews. He knows that this race on paper was his from the start, but again, the pace just did not line up with that today. Vettel was faster. Jonathan, I'm not sure if there will be a live stream of the race itself. I know that the IndyCar YouTube channel has been live streaming coverage of practice and qualifying. I don't know if they'll be live streaming the race, however, as the broadcast rights to that, in the United States anyway, are owned by ABC. Perhaps there will be a stream of the race on YouTube, however, I don't know where that will be. My stream will be commentary only, as it was for the Monaco Grand Prix. Sebastian Vettel in general seems to be a rather friendly guy. I don't think he has too many rivals in the paddock. Perhaps he and Hamilton don't get on so well considering they're fighting for the World Championship, but I do know that Vettel and Raikkonen are actually close personal friends, and I wouldn't be surprised if Vettel and Rosberg get on well either, particularly now that Rosberg is no longer racing. As far as Vettel and Kvyat, I think Mr. Torpedo needs to quiet down for a couple more years before Vettel will even speak to him again. At any event, though, once again, the final results here from the 2017 Monaco Grand Prix. Taking the win here, car number 5, Sebastian Vettel for Ferrari. His final time, 1 hour, 44 minutes, 44 seconds. P2 for Kimi Raikkonen, also of Ferrari, scoring an 18 cool points. Third place for Daniel Ricciardo of Red Bull, 3.7 seconds behind the race winner. P4, the first Mercedes of Valtteri Bottas, 5.5 seconds behind, 12 points on the board for Bottas. Fifth place for Max Verstappen in the second Red Bull, scoring 10 points. Sixth for Carlos Sainz of Toro Rosso, 8 points for him. P7, Lewis Hamilton, a good drive from Hamilton after starting 13th on the grid, 6 points for the Englishman. P8 for Romain Grosjean in the Haas, 4 points scored. P9 for Felipe Massa in the Williams with 2 points on the board. P10 in the final points paying position, Kevin Magnussen, also of Haas, a double points finish for Haas, their first of their Formula 1 tenure. P11 for Julian Palmer of Renault. He's the only Renault to finish the race after Nico Hülkenberg retired with an apparent gearbox oil leak. P12 for Esteban Ocon of Force India. Force India now ending their point-scoring run. Ocon in P12 and Perez in P13. P14 for Daniel Kvyat of Toro Rosso. DNF, and all of the finishers here, DNF classified from P14 onward. P15 classified for Lance Stroll. Kvyat and Stroll both retired on lap 71, therefore they are classified, although they did not see the checkered flag. Not classified are Stoffel Van Dorn, Marcus Ericsson, Jenson Button, Pascal Wehrlein, and Nico Hülkenberg. However, this concludes our live commentary stream for the 2017 Formula 1 Monaco Grand Prix. I will be doing a quick turnaround here, and we will be returning for a live stream of the Indy 500 featuring Fernando Alonso in that Andretti Autosport McLaren branded car. We will see you in just about 2 hours' time for the race at Indianapolis. Until then, though, thank you all very, very much for watching, and as always, see you soon.